Hello, boys and girls. So we are actually going to be going over our grammar portion of our reading story for this week. And if you look, this is actually going to be on page 736 to 737 of your Journeys book. So if we look here, we're going to be talking about commas. All right. So up here it says, how are commas used? A comma is needed after an introductory word in a sentence. One or two commas are needed to set off the name of a person being addressed. A comma separates the day and the year in a date, as well as the city and the state in a place name. Commas are used to separate items in a series, a list of nouns or actions. Okay, so let's look at our example sentence up here. It says, no, Wardell, that is not a warthog. So let's look at our first comma, which is right here. The purpose of this comma right here is to set off an introductory word. So no is our introductory word, and the comma is pretty much introducing it. All right, so let's look at over here at our second comma. This comma is coming after Wardell. This is to set off a name. So the purpose of this comma is to set off a name. And then the purpose of this comma is to set off an introductory word. So let's look at our next sentence. It says, it is the baby hippo that was rescued near Malindi, Kenya, on December 27th, 2004. So right up here, we have our two commas up here. Our first two commas, these are in a place name. So whenever we are writing a city or a state or a country, anything like that, we always make sure that we have our commas here. So these are in a place name. And then down here we know that when we're talking about a date, our comma goes after the day. So our last sentence, it says, villagers, fishermen, and visitors perform the rescue. So these commas are used to separate items in a series. And we know this because when we've done our English Simple Solutions, we know that we need to put commas after items that are in a series. So if we go ahead and look at this next sentence, it tells us that a comma is used with a conjunction to form a compound sentence. And a comma is also used to introduce quotations. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I made a little homemade stand to put my phone up using a water bottle and a candle. So I hope you guys enjoy that. So let's look at our first sentence here. It says, the tortoise was not very friendly, but he loved being tickled. So if you look here, this comma, it's to join parts of a compound sentence. So we're joining these compound sentences with the comma right here. Now, if we look at this sentence, it says, I would love to see a baby hippo, remarked Anne. Now, we worked with quotation marks way back when. All right, so right here, we see that this comma is being used in a direct quotation. Now, let's go ahead and go over the try this down here. I know it was pretty challenging for you guys, so we're going to go over this together. Now, we need to work with a partner. I am your partner. You guys are very lucky. And we need to read each sentence and tell how each comma is being used. So, you need to tell me how it's being used. Is it, remember like how we set up here, is it used to set off an introductory word? Is it used to set off a name? Is it being used in a place name? In a date, to separate items in a series? All right, and we also need to tell if it is being used to join parts of a compound sentence or in a direct quotation. So let's look at this first one. It says, Lee said, our zoo has adult hippos, but none of them have babies. So let's look at our commas. We have a comma right here. We also have a comma right here. Now, let's go ahead and look at where this comma is placed. Now, it looks like here, it is actually introducing a speech, okay? So it's introducing, so what you guys are going to write is, you're just going to write introduce your speech. Because if we see here, it's going to tell us, this comma is telling us that Lee is about to say something. So that's why that comma is placed there. It's because it's introducing speech. Now, let's look at our second comma. It's right here. It says, our zoo has adult hippos, but none of them have babies. So if we look down where this comma is, it's very, very similar to how this comma is set up right here. So that's telling us that this comma is going to join parts of a compound sentence. Okay, so you're just going to write join compound sentence. Okay, so you're going to write that. Now, if we look at number 2, it says, hey, let's look on the internet, suggested Ivan. So let's look. We have a comma right here. We have a comma right here. Now, if we look at where this comma is set up, it is very similar to how our comma is set up over here. Now, this comma right here is to set off an introductory word. So when we see our introductory word, which in this case is hey, we put a comma here because that is setting off an introductory word. So you're going to write set off. We'll just put intro for the sake of time. Intro word. Now, let's look at where this comma is right here. Okay? It is actually set up a lot similar to where our comma is set up here. Now, this is to set up to represent in a direct quotation. Okay, so this comma is also set up in a direct quotation. So then you are also going to write in a direct quotation. All right, then number 3 says, Lee and Juan ran to the computer. Now, if we look here, we have 2 commas. And if we look down here, they're set up very similar to how our commas up here are set up. Now, it looks like down here, we have an item, we have items in a series. Now, these items are 3 nouns, okay? We have Lee, Ann, and Juan. Now, these are all set up in a series, okay? So we need to make sure that we're using commas to separate series, okay? Because if we remove these commas, we would be grammatically incorrect. So you're just going to write right here to separate items in a series. Okay, so let's look at our last one. It says, they found a baby hippo in a zoo in Seattle, Washington. Now, if we look, we have a city and we have a state. So let's look up here and try to figure out which one of these commas is it representing. We know it's not representing a direct quotation. There are no quotations in sight. There is no items in a series, so it's not going to be to separate items in a series. I don't see any compound sentences, and it's not really giving us, it's not set up to show us the introductory word or to set off a name. So it must be to separate a city and a state, okay, which is how it's doing up here. So you're going to write to separate a city and a state. So remember, when you're talking about a city and a state, we need to make sure that we're putting that comma here. Okay, like we're from Cleveland, Ohio. So you would write Cleveland, comma, then you would write Ohio. And if you're looking up here and you're listing more than 2 things in a series, you need to make sure you're putting your commas. Okay, so right here we have 3 things. So we have Lee, comma, and one. All right, and then we look up here and you're doing an introductory word. Okay, so our introductory word up here was hey, so we added our comma. All right, and then since we're using a quotation, we need to make sure we have another comma here. Okay, this is setting off a direct quotation. And then if we look up here, our comma, if we're talking about 2 compound sentences, we need to make sure that our comma is in between those 2 sentences. Okay, our zoo has adult hippos, comma, but none of them have babies. Okay, so go ahead, you guys, make sure that you are writing this, try this down on a separate sheet of paper. You do not need to rewrite the whole sentence. I just need you guys to make sure that when you're going through this, you're writing what I have written down. Okay, if you have any questions, make sure you're messaging me on Edmodo or you can email me. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon.